Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah walhamdulillah. والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. I wanted to also show you guys, let me share my screen with you. Where is that? Yeah, this one. You know, Nisreen, you mentioned something about the baby schedule, and I'm thinking like it takes a really long time to get like your baby's 4 months old, so it's gonna take time. The first year it'll take you on a roller coaster. But you mentioned something, and I think it's a blessing that you're able to be home, and you mentioned it on the Slack, and I was so happy for you that you're staying home with him. Alhamdulillah, you can. Then inshallah you're not under stress. Sleep when he sleeps, wake up when he wakes up, and just enjoy the ride, you know. And honestly, one of those days you're my neighbor, and I'm a guilty neighbor. I'm going to be coming to you, and we could go for a walk together, inshallah. Love to meet Lil Adnan. Okay, so what I wanted to show you is the student portal area. So I've been putting up, we had our Ayatul Kursi. I put up that video with the test, with the notes. This is where I put everything up, and I think most of you guys know it. Inshallah, there's no issues. But I wanted to know how, like, if you're also taking advantage of taking the quizzes, and what can I do to make the quizzes more useful to you, more how do we make it maybe more interactive, or what do you want to get the most out of the quizzes? Because I put up the answer sheet as well, just so that you have the time to review it. But I realize the self-paced, we might need more support, so reach out to me, let me know what I could do, or give me your thoughts or your feedback on any suggestions that you have for that. And then the other part is this one that we haven't really talked much about, the Tafseer related spiritual development. Usually at the end of every course, I realize that I'm always like running out of time. That's why today I'm only doing one surah, alhamdulillah. So hopefully we're not gonna, this is an issue I have all the time. So it's not just now, you know, I'm always like running out of time when it comes to teaching. But basically, there's the tafsir related, like activities or exercises that you can go on. And what we typically did is at the end of the class, we would talk about what is one thing that, you know, these ayahs are calling us to do, and then how are we going to do it this week? But then what has been working since I haven't had that time is just creating this and putting up the exercises on this side. And I put up as many as come up for me, but then you're also free to try what comes up for you. What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calling you to do? What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanting you to implement in your life based on what we had been talking about? And it could be something direct, or it could be something that just resonated with you and you're like, I should do that. So last week we did Surat al-Masad, and and we talked about the rights of the kinship. And subhanallah, like I feel like Allah was testing me, you know. This week I was tested in my ability or in my capacity to reach out to family members and be the best that I can in terms of how do you show love and care and connection? How do you keep up with the ties of kinship? And you know, whatever we talk about, realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is wanting us to hear something, and He wants us, like sometimes it's really loud and sometimes it's not. So pay attention to that and write it down and honor it and sit with it and listen to it. That's honestly where the growth happens. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us all the opportunity to do that. With all the verses. But this is why I want to show you this. This is where I come and I put up with each surah, what are the activities or what are the exercises that you can engage yourself in. Do them all if you want, or you could do whichever one, like you could choose. I mean, it could seem a whole lot, but then you can also come up with your own, but commit to it. Make sure that there is in your journaling, in your time of studying, a time where you take to reflect on, and also like the ending questions, the lessons and reflections. We used to, like the way when we had live classes, we would take a few minutes of silence, people would write it down, and then we would share it and we would talk about it. But obviously in an online session, we can't do that. So it gives you the opportunity to do it. And I know like an online class works differently, but for me, something that I have benefited from is the ability to do this and have time to think about it on my own without hearing from everybody else. So there's benefit to each. So inshallah, I hope it works for you as well. Whatever questions that come up for you, answer it for you, and whatever that I give you here, I hope you still have like a lovely journal, like this lovely journal that you keep your thoughts on. Or if you're not like somebody who journals, journaling works for me. But if something else works for you, do it. And maybe one of those days I'll send you guys pictures of journaling with some of these reflections, inshallah. Especially the one from last week. It was, I feel like I still need to sit through it, and think about it. So I hope, inshallah, that makes sense. Any thoughts or questions you have about that? How do I go back to a chat box? Oh, right here. Okay. Good, okay. Oh, alhamdulillah. Good, Ayan. Good to hear that you're caught up. Please get your friend Selma on board as well. And I haven't seen her in the live, but I hope that you guys are holding one another accountable. What I've noticed is that pairs of friends have signed up for this class together. It's nice to see that. Like people that I typically know, they're usually together. They're usually like they're friends. And maybe that could be your group together. How my heart wants to have a group with everybody. And I don't know, Samar Ismahan is doing a course in Columbus. So grab her too. All right, we're gonna go ahead and start with the actual class, inshallah. And today we're doing Surat AlKafiroon. قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ. Let's go ahead and listen to it. Should I close all these?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. قل يا أيها الكافرون لا أعبد ما تعبدون ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد ولا أنا عابد ما عبدتم ولا أنتم عابدون ما أعبد لكم دينكم ولي دين.
لكم دينكم ولي دين. So with this surah, I'll tell you guys the honest truth about myself. This is a surah I always struggled with memorizing. And it wasn't until I did the tafseer of it that I no longer made mistakes in reciting it. And I was an adult. Like قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ لَا أَعْبُدُ مَا تَعْبُدُونَ وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدتُّمْ وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ. It repeats itself a lot, and you're like, I didn't know. Like, so sometimes I would count, like I would use my finger say, 6 ayahs kaltun. You just got to say 6 things. You can't say more than that. But then when I learned the tafsir of it and I realized the difference between the two sentences or the two, like between the verses, subhanallah, it clicked and it made perfect sense. And I'm really excited to share what I have learned about it. This is a very technical class today, I guess. It's very, like, a lot of the stuff that we'll be talking about, we'll be addressing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking about kufr, the idea of kufr. What is it? The idea of shirk, which is the unforgivable sin, or kufr, like it falling under kufr. We're going to talk about that, and it will be a lot of like explanation of terminologies and Islamic aqidah, basically. A lot of it will be Islamic aqidah. I believe it's very important. It's enlightening. It's for us as Muslims living in a non-Muslim country. It's really important for us to understand the differences and some of the what is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calling us to do. So this is a Mekki surah. It was revealed in the Meccan era of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We will talk about the purpose of revelation. We will talk about how the whole surah just focuses on Tawheed al-Uluhiyya, the Tawheed of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of His worship, why it was revealed, and who were the specific people that were that were instigating the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that led to the revelation of this surah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, in the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the specially merciful. Qul ya ayyuhal kafirun, say, call, make it, declare. Ya ayyuhal kafirun, O you disbelievers, la a'budu ma ta'budun, I do not worship what you worship. وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ, nor do you all worship what I worship. وَلَا أَنَا عَابِدٌ مَا عَبَدتُمْ, and nor will I ever worship what you all worship. وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ, nor will you all ever worship what I worship. Okay? لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينُ, to you is your religion, to you is your way, to you is your path, and to me is my way. Okay? So why it's a when Allah, like there's 4 surahs that start with Qul, and this is one of them. Obviously it's usually like in decorations they're usually put together. It's a surah that we recite when we're going to sleep. It's a surah the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam loved to recite, or had a habit of reciting in the 2 rak'ah sunnah before Fajr, along with Qul Huwallahu Ahad. So I think in the past we talked about Qul Huwallahu Ahad. The Prophet ﷺ had a habit of reciting it in the Fajr Salah. This surah, he would also, not in the Fajr Salah, in the Sunnah of Fajr, and then he would recite this one in the Sunnah of Fajr, because the Sunnah of Fajr is very short. It's supposed to be like very quick. So you read the shortest verses, right? Aisha radiallahu anha, she actually said, sometimes I used to wonder, did he even read that? Like, did he read anything other than the Fatiha? That's how quick it used to be. And the importance of it is that, like, it's better than the world and what's in it. That's just the Sunnah of Fajr. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us of those who establish it. And he also, I have, I guess in my notes here, that he would also read it. Let me push this a little bit. Yeah, this works. He would also read it before sleeping, and he would read it in Maghrib. I guess Sunnah for Maghrib as well. I missed that. And basically it declares like it's freedom. It's freedom from kufr, it's freedom from shirk, it's freedom from anything that goes against the aqidah and the ideology of a Muslim. Okay? It goes anything that basically you're saying, I am free from this. It's not my path. I have a different path. My path is the one with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Some scholars also call this surah Ikhlas, Surah al-Ikhlas, sincerity. Because sincerity to Allah, our worship is completely only to Allah, nothing else. And we're going to talk about some ways in which we can, how is it broken? How does kufr actually happen? In what ways? And how does shirk happen? And in what ways? So the reason why it was revealed, we know that at the time the Prophet ﷺ started the da'wah of Islam and the message of spreading the message of Islam, people like, the Quraysh, the kuffar of Quraysh were very they were trying everything they can to get him to stop. And to the end where they were just actively trying to catch him and kill him and give a whole lot of wealth and money to anybody who could kill him. But one of the things that they did is that they went to him and they said to him, Ya Muhammad, we will give you the best of the women. We will make you our leader. We will marry you to the best of the women that you choose. We will give you as much money as you want. Leave this path. Or why don't you worship our gods 1 year and we worship your God 1 year? So let's have an agreement that you are on our religion 1 year and then we will be on your religion the next year. So we'll try this 1 year and this 1 year. And so the Prophet ﷺ didn't even respond. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala responded. And if you look at the verses when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ, O you disbelievers, it carries like it's very strong words, like they're very direct. It's like you're telling somebody, oh, you disbeliever. No, I'm not going to do this. And this is not an agreement that I will ever agree to. I will not agree to it now, and I will not agree to it later. Do you guys know, I like to share a lot of kiddo stories, right? That story that Dr. Seuss, I do not like green eggs and ham. I love reading it. I love reading it, because he keeps saying, I do not like it, and I will not like it, and I do not want it, not now, not later, not in a box, not in a fox, not with a fox. He mentions everything. And every time I read it, I'm thinking of the surah, because it's like I am completely distanced from this. I will never even consider it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks in this, seems like a very aggressive way, but because what you're being called to is your salvation, is compromising your own salvation. And we know as Muslims that if a person is a believer, if they say La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, and if they die upon that without having done kufr, without having done shirk, then they are at the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah will definitely take anybody who had that iman in their heart from hellfire, and they will not be in it forever, even if they deserved it for a while, right? But if a person had kufr or had shirk or had hypocrisy, then that, and we will talk about what that entails, then those people are the ones Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us they will not enter Jannah. They will not, like, even if a camel was to go through the, what do you call, like some al-khiyab, that opening in a needle that you use to sew. Okay, so it's that serious. Well, what makes it serious? That's inshallah what we will cover. It's an important announcement, and usually the word kafirun, specifically, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was specifically speaking to the kuffar of Quraysh, because they're the ones that are coming up to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They're the ones that are starting up this conversation. They're making this request, right? But then it's a general ayah or surah for any time a Muslim is asked to compromise in their aqidah principles, like can you be okay with this part of our way, if it goes against what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordained, or if it goes against something that is so clear in the Quran and the Sunnah, and it's like such to a level where it could take you out of the fold of Islam, then it applies as well, right? And so reciting this reminds us of what it is that we're holding on to. What path are we holding on to? That our path is the path of Islam, right? So what does kafara mean? What does the word, so I have kafara in there because the word is kafirun. It's a group of people who are disbelievers. But basically the word, in Arabic, we always go back to the root word, which is composed of 3 letters, kafara. And it means like past tense, like he disbelieved, and or actually the word just means to cover something up, right? That's why also a farmer is called a kafir, because they take seeds and they put it under the ground and they cover it up. So anytime you're covering something up, it's called kufr, or like you're doing kufr linguistically. But technically, and actually it's in another slide here, technically it means the absence of iman from a person, even if his heart believes, right? So sometimes your heart might believe, but then you never did the actions, you never followed through with the action. And an example of that, I remember thinking, who could be doing that? An example of that is Abu Talib, the Prophet ﷺ's uncle. He didn't doubt Islam. He knew Islam was correct, but he did not want to accept it because he did not want to leave the way of his ancestors. So theoretically, in your heart, it makes sense. It's the truth, but then something else holds you back. And that, when it comes to iman, it has to be action, it has to be in the heart, and it has to be in action and in statements. You can't hide it. You can't say, nope, it's not. Unless a person is fearful for their life, there's something else, right, that is making them or forcing them not to show their belief. So something else that we learned from this ayah that I wanted to emphasize that is really important for us as Muslims, and in terms of like our mannerism with people that are not on the same religion as us. The Prophet sallallahu, even though here in this ayah Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya ayyuhal kafirun, realize the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to, I have their names here, Al-As ibn Wa'il, Umayyah ibn Khalaf, these people right here, Walid ibn al-Mughira, Al-Aswad ibn Abd al-Muttalib, they're the ones that asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but they were also the worst of the enemies of the Prophet. So these were people that were, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in another, the Prophet ﷺ would make dua against them. Like that's how, Al-Aswad was it, or Al-As ibn Wa'il? He specifically made dua. Al-As ibn Wa'il is the one that would go around and tell people like he's an abtar, he lost his child. And we will talk about it in another surah, Surat Al-Kawthar, I think it will come up. But Al-Aswad, the Prophet ﷺ also made dua against him and said to him, may you lose all your children and something else, may something else happen to you. And it happened. And why would the Prophet ﷺ do that? And we know that the Prophet ﷺ was very forgiving with people, but these people were at the highest level of aggression towards him. Okay. They showed the highest level of aggression towards the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In another surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, in another ayah, He tells them, "Inna kafaynaka al-mustahzi'in." We will suffice you. We will protect you from those who are mocking you. Okay, they're mocking your religion, they're mocking your ways. Basically, they were people who just all they wanted to do is sit, laugh, sip on their alcohol, and dance, have women dance for them, and they would just say, let's make fun of Muhammad and his people. So that was their ideology. So these were enemies. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking to them, it makes sense that He says, Ya ayyuhal kafirun. But in general, how did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam interact with the disbelievers, with people who were not on the same path as him? And this is something like we have to go back to, is the idea that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is someone who is sent to deliver the message of Islam. And if you want to deliver something that is really important to someone, you're going to be like mindful of the manners and the characteristics that you bring to this person, right? Because you want to win their heart before their mind. If their heart rejects you, it doesn't matter how much their mind accepts what you're saying, right? And there are people that accepted Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam just because, and Islam in general, because they just were so amazed at the good mannerism of the believers, right? But then what I wanted to emphasize, like there's having lived in a Muslim country. I've been brought up in a Muslim country, and the messages we used to hear was to be aggressive to the kafir, to be, if you're walking on a path and then somebody who's a disbeliever comes in front of you, you don't let them have the way. And while that hadith is valid, that hadith was for different context. It was at a time of war. It was at a time where the people you were dealing with were enemies that were fighting you, wanted to kill you. They were not the general people that you live amongst. I remember my Islamic studies teacher was so against the idea that I was best friends with the Christian girl in our class. There was a Christian Lebanese or Syrian girl in my class. She was my best friend. Like we were just friends. We were kids. It didn't matter, right? For Islamic studies, she would leave the class and she would just sit somewhere and play with her piano, do whatever she wanted to do, right? And it was a majority Muslim country. But the way the Islamic studies teacher used to address her and talk about her when she wasn't in the room, it felt so un-Islamic, like it was not right. And when you learn how our deen is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم. Allah does not forbid you to be kind and just to those who are not fighting with you. And so this is in the Quran. It's not like anywhere else. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam had a habit of, he had neighbors, and if somebody got sick, he would go and visit them. He would be good to his neighbors. It didn't matter what faith they were on, especially like that story of the Jewish man that he went to go visit. His son was dying, he was sick, and the Jewish man let him come in, and he sat next to the young boy, and he invited him to Islam. And the Jewish man was so moved that he told his young son, listen to this man, like accept Islam, accept it right now. And he accepts it and he dies. And his own father is saying this to him. Like, I always wonder, like, what happened to that Jewish man? Did he eventually also accept Islam? But it shows you the kindness that the Prophet ﷺ dealt with people. And then we have, like, in some, like, I know in Somali culture, we talk about, like, we literally call non-Muslims God, and specifically, like, I remember a friend of mine who was married to a convert who used to tell me people used to say to her about her husband, Gal ka Muslim ka. Gal means kafir and Muslim means Muslim, So it's like we made the term kafir like their identity, And if we treat people like that, how are we coming to them with the intention, like how are we coming to them with mercy and with the intention of, let me win your heart, if I'm already giving you labels that are not coming from a positive place? It might be true, but it's not like a kafir. Remember, it's somebody who covers up the truth. Has the truth been explained to this person? Has the truth been delivered to this person? And that's our job, right? Our job is not to say they're kafir, they already disbelieve, they don't want to take Islam. That's not our job, right? That is up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our job is to deliver in the best of manners. And that's like how the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did it. When he dealt with them in business transactions, he didn't have a different treatment for the Muslim that he had for the kafir. If he wanted to seek knowledge, he didn't have a different treatment for the Muslim than he had for the kafir. It was like, you get the beneficial knowledge a person has. You are honest and truthful with a person. SubhanAllah, there's a story of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he was a Khalifa, and a man came to him from another city, from Egypt, where I think it was Egypt or Syria, where Amr ibn al-As, who was another like great companion, was the ambassador there. And apparently the son of Amr ibn al-As hit or slapped this old man or his son, one of them. So this man came all the way to Medina just to complain to Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. So when he came, Umar ibn al-Khattab called the ambassador to come all the way from Syria and basically be present at this conversation. And when he heard from both sides, he told the man, go and get your rights, like go slap him just like he slapped you. And he said to Amr ibn al-As, when did you enslave people when Allah created them free? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought them into this world completely free. So to not take something that we have, like a blessing Allah has given you, as a means to oppress others, whether it is in our attitude, in the way we speak about them, in the way we address them, in the way we belittling is also like, it's an attitude, and it shows in the way we interact with people. There's also clear lines, we don't at the same time we are unapologetic about the fact that we believe La ilaha illallah Muhammadun Rasulullah is the way to salvation. We're not wishy-washy about that. We're not going to say, I'm sorry, maybe there'll be a way. No, if those two are not present, if Iman is not present, we cannot guarantee the person we love the most, even if they were our parents, we cannot guarantee them anything. We cannot even, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even forbids us, and it's going to come up, forbids us from asking Allah for mercy for a person that we know for sure died upon non-Islam, but then you see the balance, you don't oppress them, you don't take away their rights, you don't belittle them. They're still human, they still have value, they still have position and status and respect based on who they are and what they do, and what they you respect them, they're human beings, right? But then also you're not going to compromise the principles of the faith. So that's something important, because especially you hear sometimes that if you steal from a non-Muslim, or if you're doing this with a non-Muslim, is it still, if you backbite a non-Muslim, is that still the same sin? they're still human beings. They're still they're still your coworkers if that's what you're doing. They're still people you interact with. It's not befitting. It's not befitting for us to have double standards, right? So that's about the methodology of the Prophet ﷺ when it came to interacting with non-Muslims and disbelievers. We talked about what is kufr. People are either, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He says, هُوَ الَّذِي خَلَقَكُمْ فَمِنْكُمْ كَافِرٌ وَمِنْكُمْ مُؤْمِنٌ. That humanity is divided into two categories. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, basically, so Surat Taghabun, it's not an R, it's Taghabun, verse number 2. It is He who created you. Some of you are unbelievers, disbelievers, and some of you are believers. And Allah perceives what you do. Like Allah, Wallahu alimun bima ta'malun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basirun bima ta'malun. He sees everything that you are doing. We talked about the definition of kufr. So there are two types of kufr, major kufr and minor kufr. And then we're going to explain it. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, come back and see if there's any questions. Any thoughts, any questions? And I'm going to say, like, so that I don't take a lot of time in those little short breaks, go ahead and write your questions. Once they come up, once I'm in a good spot, I'll stop and answer them. Where am I? Okay. So when it comes to kufr, we said that it is the absence of iman from a person's heart, right? And so there could be two types of kufr. There is a major kufr and the minor kufr. Kufr akbar and kufr asghar. And the major type of kufr is divided into different categories. The first one is denial. I don't know how many of us here have taken that Yasser Qadi class, the Maghrib class called Denial. It was basically kufr. He was talking about kufr, what is kufr, and the details of it and how it happens in our society today. And so kufr is denial, that you completely deny something is truth. You say, nope, this is not true. Where is it coming from? I don't know, but this is not true. I don't believe it. I don't agree with it. It's not true. Whatever it is that you say, like Allah exists, no, Allah does not exist. You say the messenger is true, no, that's not true. When you tell somebody there is a prophet after Jesus, there was a prophet after Moses, they tell you, nope, that's not true. He was not a prophet. They just completely flat out deny, and like iman never enters the heart because you're denying a basic principle to accept the faith. The second one is arrogance, and arrogance is when you do it, you basically, it's like kibr, like you don't want to accept it. You're not even denying it. You're not saying it's not true, or like kind of like Abu Jahl. Abu Jahl, astaghfirullah, I was going to say radiyallahu anhu. Abu Jahl, he was somebody who accepted that Islam was true. But the reason why he denied and he did not want to accept it is because he said, I am from Bani Makhzum, I am from the family of Bani Makhzum, and the Prophet Muhammad is from Bani Hashim. How would we ever compete? We will never have another prophet if I accept him. So for him, it was coming from a place of my people, my tribe are better than yours, right? Like, where is that kufr coming from? It's coming from a place of feeling like no. Similarly with Iblis, Shaitan, like how did he become? He does accept Allah, but for him, he's not doubting the existence of Allah. He's not he's basically turning away because of arrogance. Turning away, doubt is when you say maybe he exists, maybe it doesn't exist, maybe it's true, maybe it's not true. You're not sure. And who falls under this category? Like people like the atheists, people like agnostics, they're growing today, and sadly, they're growing within Muslims as well. Like you see, I've a couple of friends that would tell me, like, I don't know, if college friends, like people I went to school with, people I used to interact with and hang out with. And when it really gets down to it, they tell you, I really don't know if this is all true. So what is missing for them is that sound knowledge. And sometimes that sound knowledge could be given to them, but then what breaks the heart is when a person fills their mind with other things where for Allah to take away your doubt. Like you and I can have doubt today. Doubt is not a problem. Anybody can have it. But then how do we go about getting clarity? Are we sincere in seeking the truth? Are we asking and finding who has the truth? Are we looking for it? Are we putting the effort to eliminate the doubt? That's the difference between someone who is sincere about their doubt and someone who is like, you know what, I'm very doubtful. I don't know if this is true, therefore I'm not going to accept it. Turning away is kind of like what we said about Abu Talib. He accepted it. He knew in his heart it was true, but then he left it. Or I remember I had a friend who was shaman. She was monk, and she said to me, our religion and our faith made absolute sense to her, but she could never accept it because that would mean she would have to leave her husband. That would mean she would have to leave her, her family, and she couldn't do that. So people who have other reasons that they hate, those reasons are more important than accepting this faith. Hypocrisy is when people will say like, yes, I am a believer in front of you, but behind our backs, they show a different face. They're not believers. They mock Islam, or they want the worst for Islam. They want the worst for the Muslims. They don't want the success. When do we see hypocrites? Hypocrites only appear at the time when Islam is powerful, at the time when the Muslims have power. Because if Muslims don't have power, if Islam doesn't have power, there is no benefit in wanting to appear like you're a Muslim. Right? And so we know that the first time we saw hypocrisy was when the Prophet ﷺ came to Medina, and it made sense for people to declare that they are Muslim, but they were like in their actions, in their behavior, they were showing major signs of not accepting the deen. And when I say, so there's a hadith that mentioned that all of us might have signs of hypocrisy, like a person who's lazy when they're waking up for Fajr, or lazy when they want to pray Salatul Isha. This is not the hypocrisy that takes you out of the fold of Islam. This hypocrisy, however, that falls under kufr, is the one where you are very clear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dedicates a few verses, in like a number of verses in Surat al-Baqarah to express how these people act. If they see the believers, they say, we are with you. When they go back to others, to their groups, they say, we are with you, we are only mocking them. Allahu yastahzu bihim wa yamudduhum fi tughyanihim ya'mahun. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be the one to mock them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues to let them be in this path of loss, right? Of complete like kufr, right? Darkness. So minor kufr is when any act that the Sharia has called kufr, but it does not take you out of the fold of Islam. So for example, many of us have grown up with the idea that tariku salati kafir, the one who leaves off salah, the one who does not pray, is a kafir. Is this true or not? There are authentic hadiths that say that. One of them says, al-ahd alladhi baynana wa baynahum as-salat, that the covenant that is between us and the non-Muslim the difference between us and the non-Muslim is that the prayer. And if whoever leaves it, then they have left Islam. They are kafir. And so how come that person, and I remember that was like the first moment I was so intrigued, sitting in my first Al-Maghrib class, when Sheikh Yasir Qadi was saying like, no, these people go to Jannah eventually as well. And I'm like, how does everybody go to Jannah when tariq salah? If you don't pray, you go to hellfire, you're a kafir. Because it was truly ingrained in me that I was no longer a Muslim because I didn't pray. But then our scholars make a difference for things like that. This person is not praying for personal reasons. They believe in Islam, they believe in La ilaha illallah, they believe in Muhammad Rasulullah, but they're lazy. They might pray once in a blue moon, And I pray for I pray for people like, I remember Sheikh Umar Sulaiman, who said, there are people we usually mock, or like we say it in a mockery. They're Ramadan Muslims, that only in Ramadan do they fast, only in Ramadan do they become Muslim, and then the rest of the year they're not Muslim. And he said, even in that, inshallah, there's good. And that's the kind of people that, what's holding them back is not that they don't believe. It's the fact that they're just lazy, or they're just, they're not very intentional. They're not very like purposeful in their worship, or they're missing knowledge. They're not at a place where their iman is being raised, or they just don't have knowledge to increase like their desire to meet with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Imam al-Shafi'i, he calls it kufran duna kufr, that it's a kufr that is below kufr. It's not as big as the kufr that takes you out of the fold of Islam. So if, for example, that prayer that we talked about, fighting a Muslim, basically if you cuss out a Muslim or you verbally abuse him, it's a major sin. And if you kill him or fight him, then it is like kufr. But it's the kind of kufr that is, and basically if it does not take you out of the fold of Islam, what does it become? It actually becomes major sin. Right? So a minor kufr becomes a major sin. I hope this is making sense. So what you have, like the justification for the behavior really matters in, is it kufr or is it not kufr? Is it major or not major? So somebody might not pray 5 times a day, and you tell them like, hey, come pray, and they tell you, I don't believe in that. Then that means that person is not praying because they don't even believe in the fact that the prayer is obligatory. Then that makes it major kufr, because now you're denying one of the most important principles of our deen. Does that make sense? If a person says, I will pray later, and then they don't pray, I know I should, and then they don't do it, then that person is just struggling with themselves, right? Or a person that will tell you, like you tell them stop drinking alcohol, and they feel guilty, like, I know I shouldn't, this is not good, this is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't like this. Or a person that tells you, whatever, I don't care about that stuff, or that's not true, that doesn't apply to me. And then they send you pictures of them drinking, and they tell you, hallelujah, drinking day for me today. And then you really that is somebody who is denying and basically falling under one of these categories. Either they're denying, they're being arrogant, they're in doubt, they're turning away, or I don't want to say hypocrites, but they're using mockery to so mockery is one of the things that the hypocrites use, right? Then there are people that just doubt, or they turn away, and they continue in the use of mockery, right? And I remember asking somebody recently, a friend of mine actually, somebody from back in the college days, they said he said clearly that he was an agnostic, and that was okay, fine, but then there's always these messages about what Muslims are doing or what Islam is calling for, and then it's it's in a sarcastic and a mockery way. And then he actually said, I'm only mocking. And then I said, what's the intention behind the mocking? And he said to me, just to be silly and make fun of things, just like I do all the time. And so that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls kufr. There was a group of people in a battle, and they were at the end of the battle, they were the hypocrites. And then one of them said, Wallahi, I've never seen people that have more bigger bellies. And he said something very sarcastic about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions, right? And so one of the believers heard him, and he said, Wallahi, I'm going to go tell the Prophet. By the time this man went from the end of the caravan to the beginning of it where the Prophet ﷺ was, Allah had already revealed verses about what they said. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in Surat At-Tawbah, he basically says, قُلْ أَبِاللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ وَآيَاتِهِ كُنْتُمْ تَسْتَهْزِئُونَ. Are you mocking Allah and His Prophet and his verses or his doctrine or his ways? لا تعتذروا قد كفرتم بعد إيمانكم. Do not apologize. You have done kufr after you have actually tried to believe. So they tried to go and say, no, maybe I made a mistake in those verses, but basically, like that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls it. I see 2 questions, so I'll take a pause. Yes, how does a minor kufr become major kufr? Yes, I can do that. What is the shit? Oh. So you see how the examples that I have here, a person who does not pray 5 times a day, the behavior, the Prophet ﷺ calls it kufr. Whatever they're like, if they are doing it for lazy reasons. A person who is fighting a Muslim, the Prophet ﷺ calls it kufr, right? But then that kufr is not the type of kufr that takes you out of the fold of Islam. But because it is called kufr, it is very serious. And that seriousness, the scholars consider it to be a major sin. So a person who drinks alcohol, they're not doing kufr. I should say that's fisq. But those 2 examples are the examples that I had from with ahadith, right? Any act that the Sharia or the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ calls kufr, but it's the type of kufr that does not take you out of the fold of Islam, then that behavior becomes a major sin. Okay, does that make sense, Rabia? How do I see the chats? Okay. Yes, alhamdulillah, perfect. Okay. So, and then that's why we say it depends on how do we know if an act is major kufr or minor kufr? Justification matters. How are they doing it? Why are they doing it? You know? Recently heard of somebody that I knew that, you know, they got really ill, and this person like is very old, but then they never pray, you know, they never pray. But then because they got ill, they started to pray. And then it was like, okay, then they stopped praying after things got better. But this is a very old person. And I know like when others talked about the situation, they talked about it like, he just doesn't believe in Islam or something. But then you're like, no, if this person recognized that at the time of need that prayer and Allah, going back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is what helped them, inshallah, it's not kufr. It doesn't take the person out of the fold of Islam. They have other reasons. They have other personal shortcomings. I should have this in red. Personal shortcomings. Okay. And wallahi, like learning that, you guys, that was the biggest reason why I started praying. Because if for me, like I was 23 years old and I remember like really struggling with salah. I could never keep up with more than a week of like prayer, you know, not a week is even generous. When I took that class, the Aqidah class, where a lot of this was explained, all these notes, you guys, are from like the Light of Guidance class. When he explained this, it felt like there was hope, you know? But when you take hope away from people, it's like, why should I even do it anyway? You know, what's the point? But there was other things too. There was like the idea of like who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was and how he wasn't out there to just punish me and put me in hellfire. That made a difference. I used to fast Ramadan and listen to Quran and stop listening to music in Ramadan, but then I would still not pray. It was that hard for me to just pray. But once this was explained, I remember like for 2 weeks I was praying and I was shocked. Like, I can't believe I just prayed for 2 weeks straight. And that's when I came up with like a punishment system for myself if I miss salah. And alhamdulillah, Allah made it consistent. So how is shirk and hypocrisy related to kufr? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, he tells us, Inna Allah yaghfiru dhunuba jami'an wa la yaghfiru an yushraka bih. Allah will forgive all the sins and he will never forgive that you do shirk with him. Does that mean Allah will forgive the kufr? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that the kuffar are going to be in hellfire forever. Allah mentions that the hypocrites are going to be in the lowest levels of hellfire. Where do they all fit? So we had this diagram to explain it, that kufr is the major umbrella, and kufr is to deny, right? Now shirk is to associate partners with Allah. That there are people who associate partners with Allah, that a person could be doing kufr, but they don't associate partners with Allah. So for example, an atheist or an agnostic or somebody who just turns away, they don't have a faith, they don't have a religion, they don't ascribe their spirituality to any specific being. It's just, I'm a spiritual person, I worship, I believe in the mother nature. There isn't any specific shirk, right? Whereas somebody is worshiping idols, or they're worshiping this individual, or they're worshiping this statue, they're worshiping something. That is shirk. That is now like where associating partner with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes in. So it is still out of the fold of Islam. It's still out of, it falls under kufr, but it's a special category under kufr. And same thing with hypocrisy. They are showing Islam, or they're showing belief when they are covering up disbelief. You don't see it, it's not apparent, right? But then it also falls under, it's hidden, so it falls under kufr. In the next couple of verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لا أعبد ما تعبدون. So here, قُلْ يَا أَيُّهَا الْكَافِرُونَ was the first ayah. I do not, this is now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking in the tongue of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like, you say to them, so this is Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, what is he expected to say? I do not worship what you worship, okay? I do not worship what you worship. And then the second one he says is, and you all do not worship what I worship. So I do not, like right now in the present day, I do not do it. And then in the second part, he says, and I will not worship what you all worship. So the difference between these two, like the first two sentences, these two sentences, and then these other two sentences, what is the difference? There are 4 different explanations by the scholars, and this is what helped me not make mistakes or memorize this surah and not make mistakes in reciting it. Is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I don't worship idols, I don't follow your way of worship. And the second reason why the scholars mention there's a repetition is that Allah, like there's an emphasis, we're just trying to emphasize it, so I'm going to repeat it twice. But then there is that third explanation, which is the grammatical, okay, that you use the present and the future tense. And the present, when you use the present, in like a'budu, you're talking about when you do it about, you're talking about like right now I don't do it. Abidun is like present continuous, is that what you call it? Is action based. So it's abidun is like in the future I will not do it. So here it's talking about philosophically, this is not even possible. Like this is not, I will never do it. Like this idea can never even happen, right? This possibility is not even something that can even can ever be true. It's not logical, right? So I will never do it. So when it comes to the group, it's the same. It does not change. وَلَا أَنْتُمْ عَابِدُونَ مَا أَعْبُدُ. But I guess it goes with the same meaning. Like I do not now worship what you worship. Neither do you all now worship what I worship. And I will not in the future ever worship what you all worship. And neither will you ever worship in the future what I worship. So to you is your way and to me is my way. So does that make sense? So the first sentence is action-based. The second sentence is theory-based. I don't do it and it's unacceptable for me to do it. So that's where like the difference is. Like all of these opinions are valid. They're all correct. Like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does use repetition to emphasize. So I don't worship idols, nor do I follow your way of worship. So your way of worship, think of it in terms of also like your ideas of like how you live life, how you, like the kuffar of Quraysh, yes, they worship the idols, but then there's other things that they did, which we will come up to. Like, that's when we will understand the Prophet ﷺ is distancing himself from anything that like is going to show that I might be okay with a part of how you go about your faith and your religion. So we have to understand what is worship in Islam and what is the opposite of it, and what are the consequences of it, and then how did the kuffar of Quraysh worship, so that we can understand like why philosophically the idea is not even something that I'm going to entertain. So worship in Islam, and I think we've talked about this before, is that linguistically it means humility. Abada means like to have that humility. Ibn Kathir and Ibn Taymiyyah give two definitions of worship or ibadah, like that are basically very encompassing, very, very comprehensive. Ibn Kathir says that it's a state in which that combines, like a state of being that combines perfection of love. So I love Allah, I absolutely love him, and I'm completely submitted to him, and in everything and in every way, and I'm in awe and fear of him. I don't want to disappoint him, I don't want to get his anger, I definitely do not want to ever face his punishment. You see how these three are like if the person has all these three, then they have worship, right? These are actually the pillars. We will come to the pillars of worship: hope, love, hope, and fear. Okay? Ibn Taymiyyah, he says it's a comprehensive term. It's a term that brings together everything of our acts that are hidden and that are apparent. Okay, and they could be coming from the heart, they are coming from the tongue, or they are coming with our actions. So think of it as an ideology. Like if I believe, for example, eating frogs is haram. Like, no, it's unacceptable. And somebody comes to me and says, no, eating frog is okay. So I reject the idea. I hate the idea. I oppose the idea. I will do whatever I can to stand up against that idea. But what if that idea, Islam was perfectly fine with it? That Islam said, you know what, if you want, you can eat frog. If you want, you can leave it, you know? And I hope we don't eat frogs. And I don't eat frog. I don't eat a lot of things, but I just used frogs, okay? And I don't even know the fiqh opinion, I think, Allahu A'lam. But anyways, so imagine if that person rejects the whole message of Islam because they are so fixed on the idea that frogs cannot be eaten, so therefore I will never accept anything that tells me it's okay to eat frogs. So their idea of what is right and what is correct is coming from them. It's coming from something that they believe in their heart. So do you see like the actions of the heart? That determines, like, do you love Allah? Do you respect Allah? Do you love and respect the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Do you believe that mocking the Prophet is unacceptable? If you don't believe that, and if you believe that, no, it's my freedom of speech, I can mock him and I can speak about him the way I want to speak about him, then you are, in your heart, you're doing something that goes against the message of Islam. So the reason why this is really important to consider is because we see nowadays people who are they will mock, and they will mock anyone that they want, right? We live in this culture where we just show, like, it's basically it's my right to be able to mock whoever I want and whatever I want. But then when we do that to Allah and his prophets, and we mock Jesus, and we mock Musa alayhi salam, and we mock Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the Muslims get angry, and it's like, no way you could do that. But no prophet of Allah is supposed to be mocked, because these are people that are righteous, that are connecting us to Allah himself. So when you mock the messenger, you're also mocking the God. Right? So these are things that come from the heart. And then verbally, when you doing dhikr, you calling to the path of Allah, you speaking kind words is worship. But what about when you do the opposite? When you turn away and you say, like, Islam is not true, like that's like kufr is also the same thing. With your limbs, same thing. Like you're actively fighting a person who says, I submit to this message of Islam. So that's the definition of ibadah, but then it also applies to kufr, you know? And this is what worries me sometimes. Like people think they're having casual conversations about things that you're like, it's not befitting for us to speak in this way, you know? If I don't know, I think I have a slide where I wanted to give more specific examples about different ideologies that exist today. So I will not do it right now. We will come to it later, inshallah. So worship in Islam, the pillars of worship are love, hope, and fear. Is that I love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's why I'm worshiping him. He deserves to be loved. He is like, I'm grateful for who he is in my life. He loves and avoid. So love is to love Allah and love what he loves, and loves to avoid what will distance one from the love of Allah. So basically the ultimate goal in our worship is to earn the love of Allah. That's the ultimate goal, to earn the love and the approval and the pleasing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And sometimes, even though we're sinners, we still get that. You know, even though we still commit sins, we still get that. So that's the beauty of like worship, that you don't leave the fold of Islam because you committed a sin. No, Allah still loves you, cares for you, will accept you, will forgive you, will honor you, will be grateful to the little bit that you do. Like that's why like love is so important in our faith, right? Hope that you expect that the best from Allah, that you don't expect Allah to be out there to just punish you, and he's not holding this thing to hurt you. No, he wants to forgive you. He's going to forgive me, inshallah. I'm trying my best. I know I am weak. I know I could do better, but I'm still trying, you know. Let me go back to my notes because I really want to share this hadith. A man came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he said to him, where is it? They never combine in the heart of a person except that. A man said to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I hope the best from Allah, but I am so scared of my sins. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam responded by saying, they never gather in one heart except that Allah grants you what you want and protects you from what you are afraid of. So think about all the times that we did that in our hearts, like where we truly, sincerely in our hearts, we became very vulnerable and very open with Allah and said, Ya Allah, I know I could be doing better. I know I should be doing better. I know I should not have done that. And we ask Allah, like, Ya Allah, by your mercy, forgive me and let that go from me. And so whenever they come to a heart, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will protect us, will answer us, will give us what we want. Alhamdulillah, like look at that, look at where our faith is coming from. But then fear is also real. I know, like, I feel the reason why I don't like to emphasize fear is because I feel like we overused it. We overuse it as Muslims, and we tell people, like we tell even children, do this or you're going to go to hellfire. You do this or you Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish you. We make everything about fear when we forget about the love and the hope. And so the way there is a balance in the Quran, even where when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about Jannah, he speaks about hellfire. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about punishment, he speaks about reward. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about a good person, Allah speaks about a bad person. All to get us to realize that, and Allah speaks a lot more about himself and all the reasons why we should love him, right? So love is the heart, and then the hope and the mercy are the two wings that you use to fly. And how do you know which wing to put more effort in? Depends on where you're at that day and that time. If you have been neglectful, if you have been heedless, then you use a little bit more of the fear. And if you are in a state where you have been feeling really like down about yourself, then use the hope and bring yourself up with the hope. So that's how the scholars make a balance, right? And then this ayah in the Quran brings all of the three together. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, though the people who do this, who live with those three emotions, this is how they do it. They call upon Allah, they want to get away to the pleasure and to the love. They're seeking Allah. They're basically, all they want is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Him being pleased with them. أَيُّهُمْ أَقْرَبُ, which one of them will be closest to Him. وَيَرْجُونَ رَحْمَتَهُ, they hope for His mercy. وَيَخَافُونَ عَذَابَهُ, and they are afraid of His punishment. إِنَّ عَذَابَ رَبِّكَ كَانَ مَحْذُورًا, indeed, for sure, the punishment of your Lord is something to be dreaded. It's something to be scared of. It's not even going to be negotiable. Like, it's non-negotiable. We're going to do whatever we can to avoid it, right? So having that understanding will give us, like, if we're about to commit a sin, you snap back to that, you know? I hope I'm not interrupted, ladies, inshallah. All right, worship in Islam now continued. What are the conditions of ibadah? What makes ibadah acceptable, right? Without these two, our worship is not acceptable. One is that it has to be done completely for the sake of Allah. It cannot be done for anything other than the sake of Allah, right? And when we talked about Surat Al-Ikhlas, we talked about like what is sincere, what does it look like to have that sincerity? And obviously we're not going to be perfect, but we try our best. And then when it comes to the correct, is this act correct? Then we go back to the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the two conditions are: am I sincere for the sake of Allah? And am I doing this in a way where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has taught me? Is this aligned with the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Now, there's an important principle here: who has the burden of proof? I'm wondering if I should go into it. Let's explain it, because it's a pretty important principle in our aqidah. So basically, why am I saying who has the burden of proof? Now, the default when it comes to any act of worship, what I mean by that is acts that are specifically connecting me to Allah. So for example, my prayer, the way I make dua, the way I do dhikr, the way I do fasting, the way I'm going to do my zakah and my sadaqah, the way I'm going to recite the Quran, the way like every specific act of worship that is between me and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a personal ibadah, okay? That personal ibadah, or it could be a community ibadah like doing hajj. I have to do it in a way that I have to have evidence that it is correct for me to do this before I actually do it, okay? So the evidence comes before doing it. So if I start to pray right now and you ask me, why are you praying? I have to give you the evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah that shows you that it is okay for me to pray at this time. So I have to tell you this ayah or this hadith. Does that make sense? Because you are telling me, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this act of worship? And I'm going to explain why I'm doing it based on the resources, the Quran and the Sunnah. If, let's say, I decided to wear this hijab today and it's colorful, right? And you're surprised. You're like, oh, why are you wearing a colorful hijab? And I'm telling you, why not? Why couldn't I wear this colorful hijab? Who has to show the proof that what I'm doing is incorrect? If that's what we're alluding to, then you have to show the evidence. Why? Because like the color of my hijab or what color of my clothes. Now this is something, what do you call, this is part of life, right? This is the colors that I choose for my house, the type of house I choose to live in, where I choose to live. These are things that are part of life. You know, how I raise my children. These are part of it. Everything then is considered halal, and it's haram, and it only becomes haram if we have an evidence to show that it is not acceptable, right? So if you ask me, why are you wearing this? And I tell you, why couldn't I wear it? Who has the burden of proof? You have the burden of proof, because you have to show me why it would not be acceptable. Does that make sense? So every act of worship is haram unless we have evidence that it is halal. that it is acceptable that we could do it. And every non-worship act like dunya or dunya affairs is completely halal unless we have evidence that it is haram. Now imagine like people who accepted Islam and they live in different parts of the world, they have different backgrounds, different cultures, and Islam did not come to change their ways. Islam came, like, if something was absolutely wrong, there was evidence that you couldn't do this. But other than that, everything else, like, you live your life the way you have always known to live it, And this is something interesting for like converts. As soon as like they accept Islam, like, we bombard them with all the things that they must be doing, but they also carry this sense of I have to change my whole life. And no, not really, not your whole life. It starts with learning what you're supposed to do and how you worship Allah. And then these other things will come up eventually. Like it's part of life. You will eventually gradually learn it, but it's not like everything you have known is bad. No, it's not everything you have known is bad. And I'm sure, like, for a lot of converts, they talk about this, that where they, in the beginning, it's like completely disconnect themselves from their ways and their culture and their families and everything. And then eventually, when they have learned more, they realize, oh, like, this is actually okay. I could go back and I could, be part of this culture because it's my culture. It's who I am, and Islam is not against that. Ibadah. You guys write your questions, because I feel like I hope I didn't lose anybody with this idea. Okay. If you have any questions, please go ahead and write them. I will be looking at them, inshallah. I'll just have a sip of water. I will not stop. I'll just continue. So worship of Allah, ibadah, without the oneness of Allah is considered shirk. Why do we say that? Now we have to get into what is the definition of shirk and what makes it. So I see a Firdosa in here, and I'm wondering if that's Firdosa Abdi or if that's Firdosa, my cousin, because my cousin is also taking the class. So I remember the funniest thing is that when my first class that I took with al-Maghrib was about Aqidah. We learned all about kufr and shirk and what it was. So because everything was so new to me, I always called everything shirk. Like, and my cousin would just say shirk, because we lived together. And I used to be like, what? You just need to go take that class so you'll understand what I'm talking about. But the reality was I was obsessed with the word and labeling everything as shirk. So just a reminder, like, to myself, about that time of, like, when something is new to you, it has to first sink in before you start, like, shirk everything, but it was funny because she I remember her, like, really just saying, Kaltoum, like, what in the world did this class do to you? It made me see everything as shirk. Astaghfirullah. It didn't, I'm joking. So anyways, so what is shirk? Shirk is to give the right of Allah to other than Allah. Basic. Something Allah has the right for, you give it to somebody other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why is it dangerous? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says it's the unforgivable sin. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَغْفِرُ أَن يُشْرَكَ بِهِ وَيَغْفِرُ مَا دُونَ ذَلِكَ. That Allah will not forgive that you associate partners with Him or that you give His rights to anybody else, but He will forgive everything below that for whomever He wants. وَمَنْ يُشْرِكْ بِاللَّهِ فَقَدْ افْتَرَى إِثْمًا عَظِيمًا. Then he has basically made up a great lie, great sin against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And remember when we talked about in Surat Al-Ikhlas, like, the magnitude of saying certain things about Allah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will provide for us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us. He's the one who provides the rain. He's the one who gives us the food and the vegetation, what we eat. He's the one who gives us our health and our families and takes care of us. And the mushrik, the people who do shirk, they know that too, that all of these come from Allah. But then when we're making dua, when we're asking, we go to an idol, or we go to like another individual human being, and we say, oh, that individual human being is going to give us salvation and give us forgiveness, and because of them we're going to enter into Jannah. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will, like, basically that is the right of Allah. Only Allah forgives, only Allah gives, only Allah will grant you a child, only Allah will do all these things for you. And sadly, even the Muslim ummah has some practices that has, like, where they have fallen into shirk like that. Where I remember a story, a man and a woman who didn't have children for a very, very long time, and they were just desperate. They were very desperate. I think it was Sheikh Abdul Bari Yahya that told us. And at some point, this like, I don't know if they call it a magician, but there are people, remember we talked about them last week, like they do healing. They call themselves spiritual healers, but they're not connected to Allah. They're connected to other beings, the jinn and things like that. And so one of those called them and asked them to bring this many chickens to do a slaughter, and that is definitely something that is not connected to Allah. It's like basically those crazy things that you do with that involve the jinn, that do not involve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know this is haram and this is not acceptable. But I guess, like, this happens even in Muslim countries, even with some like people who really think that they are trying to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're worshipping Allah. But then, like, I remember there was another story where Sheikh Wali told us about a man who is driving. He's a taxi driver in Egypt, and he says, like, like, if you don't say this phrase when you come to this area, then that al-adawiyya, like this woman that was righteous, she's going to be upset with us, and she might not listen, like she might hurt us, she might actually come after us and hurt us. So when you associate fear, remember, we go back here, like, you remember how we said that the fear is only to Allah, so you cannot fear another, like, so you cannot give another being supernatural fear, and that's what a lot of them do. And it's like, this is and I think that, Allah, alhamdulillah, that our communities, our Muslim communities, have been cleansed from a lot of that in, like, the recent years, in the recent decades, actually. But it still does exist, it still does happen, and that's why we have to know the difference. This is something that should only be done with Allah, that I should only elevate a person to this status because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them. Like, if I'm going to ask them of the knowledge of the unseen, then anyways, I'm getting into places that are not even related to this. Okay, so the dangers of shirk, that's where we were at. I don't know why I went into that, but basically I think I was trying to explain that giving the right of Allah to other than Allah, okay, nullifies your good deeds. Like, as many good deeds as you had, everything will be wiped out. It's as if you've never done anything good. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. If it was revealed to me that if you, and to the people before me, like to the prophets and messengers before me, if you commit shirk, then all of your deeds will be wiped away. Okay, لا يحبطن عملك ولا تكونن من الخاسرين, and you will be of those who are regretful. So don't ever go near shirk. Don't do anything where you're giving the right of Allah to other than Allah. If a person dies in a state of shirk, then we are not even allowed to ask Allah to forgive them. And this is what we were mentioning earlier. If we loved our parents, but they happen to really die upon a state of where they did not accept La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah, or they were worshipping other than Allah, and we are not even allowed to ask Allah to forgive them. It's not even befitting. It's not like, Allah will not accept it, but it's also for us to recognize that this is a boundary. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions it in the Quran. It goes against what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran. If you're asking him, like, Ya Allah, send another prophet, when you know Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the last one. that's not an acceptable dua. Like it's not even realistic. So that's why it's that. And there's a lot more, but what did the Quraysh, or how did the Quraysh, what did the Quraysh specifically do? How did they worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or how did they worship their idols? So the Quraysh, before the introduction of the idols, had the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam, okay? Because Ibrahim and Ismail, they came and they built, they were in that area, they built the Kaaba, they taught people how to do the Hajj, people so worshipped Allah alone, right? But then there comes a time where people kind of digress after generations and generations, and the first person who did that for the Quraysh, or for the people of the Arabs in Mecca, was Amr ibn Luhay. He was a well-known and respected man. He went to Bilad al-Sham, and he saw that people were bowing down to idols that they made. And so he said, oh, this is a great idea. So he introduced idols to Mecca, and he brought Hubal. Hubal was the biggest of them, right? I'lu Hubal, they would say, like, may you be the highest of Hubal. And Al-Lata wal-Uzza wa Manat al-Thalithat al-Ukhra, those are the famous ones that Allah mentions in the Quran, and we hear in the Sunnah. But then they had like 360 different idols in the Kaaba when the Prophet ﷺ took over and got rid of all these idols, right? And some of the things that they would do is that they would devote themselves, they would seek refuge and call for help, either from these gods that they were, and these gods at some point were individuals that were righteous, that were good, that they loved and that they respected, but then when they died, because they loved them so much, they venerated them, they created an idol in their name and in their shape, and they said they were so great, so we're going to go through them to get to God, right? So they are the path to God. They are not God themselves, and they knew that, because a man came to the Prophet ﷺ, and he said to him one time, the Prophet asked him, how many gods do you have? He said, I have so many in this dunya, but then I have one only in the heavens. And he said to him, why don't you let go of all the ones in this dunya and then just go to the one that is above there? And it was so simple, the man accepted Islam right away, because the idea was so simple. So let go of all these other things, intermediaries that you have between you and God. You do not need an intermediary between you and Allah, right? And so they would, the pilgrimage that they would do around the Kaaba, they would do it around their idols. They would do tawaf around the idol. They would do sujood to the idol. And then they would seek favors from the idols. They would sacrifice. So how would they sacrifice? They would bring food to them. And so the Quran speaks about this, in specifically Ibrahim alayhi salam. He says to the gods of his people, before he takes a hammer and smashes all of them, he says to them, "Ma lakum la ta'kulun?" Why are you not eating? And I never understood what. I was memorizing those verses, and then one day I went to this Asian restaurant, and when I was leaving, there was Buddha, the image of Buddha, and right in front of it there are apples and fruits and oranges. And I was thinking, it connected. It's like, oh my God, you put the food in front of the God. This is food that you're offering to the God out of respect, and you're hoping they would give you something back, right? And so the ayah, just the first thing that came to my mind was that ayah that I was memorizing that whole week. Ibrahim alayhi salam saying to the idols, "Ma lakum la ta'kulun?" Why are you not eating? The people that are worshiping you, they're giving you this thinking that you're going to benefit from it. So what do we do for Allah? We do things in His sake. We slaughter an animal, and then what do we do with it? Do we sit it somewhere and give it to Allah? No, we go and we give it to the poor, give it to friends, invite people to eat it, and Allah, maybe that's what they eventually do with the food, but Allah Ta'ala. them. So that's something like offering sacrifices. That's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, like, this is not befitting. Dedicating certain parts of the food to the idols along with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says in Surat Al-An'am, whenever they would slaughter an animal, they would say, هَذَا لِلَّهِ وَهَذَا لِشُرَكَائِنَا. These are for like the ones that we associate with Allah, right? If they even called it shirka, like sharika means like literally the word sharika means to have an association, to have a partnership. You know, to me and you, we start a sharika, we start a company together, like we're partnering up together to do something together. So they would say هذا لشركائنا, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says none of it reaches Allah. Anything that you associate partners with, none of it is reaching to Allah. Keep it for yourself. Dedicated some of the cattle as forbidden. You don't touch this cattle. Allah, like basically they are cattle that God, like these gods, they are dedicated to our gods, and so we don't slaughter them, we don't use them, we don't do anything with them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says again in the Quran in Surah Al-Ma'idah, there are no such a thing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not differentiate between the gods. There are between the animals or the cattle there. So like this is not acceptable. You can't do this, and they do it in the name of God, you know, sparing some cattle from their purpose as dedicated to the other idols. That's what I just mentioned. Other types of associating partners with Allah. So if they want to make a decision about something, should I travel? Should I get married? Who is the father of this child? So paternity test, right? They didn't have DNA testings these days, or the Maury show. So what they would do is they would do azlam, arrows. They would, basically throw them, and then wherever direction it points at, that's how you get your decision. How do we make our decision? We go based on istikhara. We go based on information, like factual information that we know. They would go to fortune tellers and soothsayers and use astrology to find out about the future, to find out about the past, to find out about things. And that's using the power of the jinn that is natural for them, but supernatural for us. They would have things like superstition. If you saw, let's say, and all cultures have this, if you are trying to go outside and you were trying to get something important done and it's raining, that's a bad sign. I'm not going to do it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not allow us to give natural, we cannot give natural occurrences any supernatural, reasons. Like, we cannot give them supernatural definitions. Okay, what that means is that a cat passed by and it was a black cat. I'm not going to change my plans. It was just a cat. It's not basically I'm letting these things decide my life, and we don't do that. Only Allah decides what you do, right? And you don't live like your life like that. Changing the worship of the Kaaba, made pilgrims perform tawaf naked, whistling, making noises and clapping. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَمَا كَانَ دُعَاهُمْ إِلَّا مُكَاءٌ وَتَصْدِيَةٌ. When they went around the Kaaba, yes, they did the tawaf that Ibrahim alayhi salam taught them, but then they would do it naked. And there were stories where the Prophet ﷺ almost tried to do that one time, and he tried to go and join something. I don't know about that. But he fell down. Basically, the Prophet ﷺ lost his conscience. Okay, he lost his conscience. And then they would whistle, they would clap, they would make noises, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, this is not worship, So how do we do it? How does Allah want us to do it? You go around the Kaaba and you call upon Allah and you make dua, and you make dua for yourself, and you make dua for your loved ones, and you pray 2 rak'ahs, or you pray the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught you. That saying, labbaik Allahumma labbaik. Oh, here I come to you, Allah. Labbaik la sharika laka labbaik. Here I come, you have no partners. The kuffar of Quraysh, they used to add a phrase. Do I have it here they used to add another phrase where they would say, Labbaik Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka labbaik, and then they would say, Illa sharikan huwa laka tamlikuhu wa ma malak, except for a partner that belongs to you, you own him and what he owns. Okay? So who made that exception? Who said this is okay? This is what they came up with. And when La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah came, the message of Islam came, it was saying, reject all of this. So do you see how this was their style of life that the Prophet ﷺ was knocking out? Was the Quran knocking out? Was saying, this is not befitting, this is not okay. And so when they refused to do that, they refused to submit to Allah alone. Why did they do this? I forgot this whole slide. Why did they do this? They said only to bring them closer to Allah. The idols would intercede for them with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ignorance-based worship. So basically summarizing everything. Those are the three reasons. And this is the ayah in Surat Zumar where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, to Allah belongs the deen completely, sincerely. وَالَّذِينَ اتَّخَذُوا مِن دُونِهِ أَوْلِيَاءَ, and those who take partners aside from Allah, مَا نَعْبُدُهُمْ, we do not worship them except so that they bring us closer to Allah. We only, okay, let me highlight the English. They say we only worship them that they may bring us nearer to Allah. Who gave them that right? You gave them the right. Allah never gave them that right. Allah will judge between them regarding their differences. Allah does not guide the lying blasphemer. So if you, in Allah la yahdi man huwa kadhibun kaffar. So if the truth has been revealed to you and you still choose to deny, then you are a liar. You are lying because this does not come from Allah, and you're kaffar. You are basically in a state of kufr. You are basically rejecting. You're saying, nope, I'm going to cover up the truth. Okay? And we already talked about that. Lakum dinukum waliya deen. Are there any? I'm trying to see if there's any questions in here. What is this? Okay. Oh, okay, Samar. Okay, so you're very welcome, Samar. Jazakillah khair. I do like to, I guess I connect a lot to my stories and share a lot of stories. Sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, that's too much, but thank you. Jazakillah khair. Rebuilding the Kaaba, the Prophet ﷺ fainted because he revealed himself. Okay, good. Thank you, Ayan. Thank you. So that was rebuilding the Kaaba. And that was the practice of the people, and he wanted to reveal himself, and he fainted. Not that he wanted to worship. He wasn't trying to do what they're doing, right? That's what I thought I was confused a little. I'm going to drink, and then we're going to start again. Okay. Share screen again. I don't see myself anymore. I guess you guys see me, right? I hope you guys see me, but I don't know. So then the next ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينٍ. To you is your religion, to you is your path, to you is your ways, to you is your ideology, to you is your philosophical stuff. But then to me is my deen, the one that is coming from Allah, Tawheed, right? وَإِن كَذَّبُوكَ فَقُلْ لِي عَمَلِي. And say if they accuse you of lying, which they were, tell them, to me is what I do, and to you is what you do. أَنْتُمْ بَرِيئُونَ مِمَّا أَعْمَلْ وَأَنَا بَرِيءٌ مِمَّا تَعْمَلُونَ. You are free of what I do, and I am free of what you do. We're not going to it's like fine. You know what I mean? And to me, it's like that communicates. There's no force. There's no, the only reason why the Prophet ﷺ, they would have battles. It wasn't like you need to accept Islam. It was never about that. It was always about the deen of Allah. The way of Allah needs to be if somebody wants to worship Allah, they need to be able to do it, and they have to have the freedom to do it. Because when the kuffar were not accepting Islam, they were also not letting the Muslims worship in freedom. They were punishing them, they were abusing them, they were sometimes killing them, and so Islam was fighting for the idea of freedom. Let people worship what they want to worship, right? So these are other verses that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, and those who they call upon, they do not have any shafa'ah, they cannot intercede for them. إِلَّا مَنْ شَهِدَ بِالْحَقِّ وَهُمْ يَعْلَمُونَ, except for the one who testifies to the truth and have knowledge. That ayah, that part of it is speaking about someone like Jesus, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls him and he says to him, Ya Isa, أَأَنْتَ قُلْتَ لِلنَّاسِ أَنْ يَعْبُدُوكَ وَأُمَّكَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ, did you tell the people to worship you and your mother besides me? And then Isa says, like, subhanaka, like, may you be glorified, you're far removed from this imperfection. It was never befitting for me to say this. And if I said it, then you would have known about it. But then they are your slaves. After I was gone, they did these things. If you want, you can forgive them. If you want, you can punish them. So Isa alayhi salam, and then there are people, like, these are righteous people. They never really agreed to be worshipped. They were good people. Just because these people created idols in their names does not mean that their righteousness is going to be taken away. No, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring them, and they will say, they will speak the truth. They will testify to the truth that they knew, which was, we had no knowledge about this, and we did not say this, and we did not advocate for it. And Allah, you were a witness, وَلَئِنْ سَأَلْتَهُمْ مَنْ خَلَقَهُمْ لَيَقُولُنَّ اللَّهِ. If you were to ask them, and the Quran repeats this so many times, if you were to ask them who created them, they would say Allah. So then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, then why then do they deviate? Why then do they worship something else? وَقِيلِهِ يَا رَبِّ إِنَّ هَؤُلَاءِ قَوْمٌ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. Oh our Rabb, these are people that do not believe. فَاصْفَحْ عَنْهُمْ وَقُلْ سَلَامٌ فَسَوْفَ يَعْلَمُونَ. This is now Allah saying them to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you should do this. What is it? Pardon them and say peace, they will come to know. This is how you depart from the person who is who's doing kufr, right? When we see how people though interact, is this the behavior that we see? Is that peace? Hey, you know what, to you is your way, to me is my way. Is that what we see? Or do we see anger, animosity, name calling, fighting, cyberbullying? Like, do we see that, or do we see this behavior? So when Allah how do we coexist? This is how we coexist. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, pardon them, meaning like, khalas, just make excuses for them. They don't believe. Maybe Allah will open their heart. You don't stop in showing your faith and in sharing it in a good way. Obviously, as much as, like that person is going to be okay with it or allow you to, but then you accept that they have, what do they call it? They have their own willpower, that they make their own decisions, and they will come to know at some day. You just can ask them in the kindness, in the most kind way. You cannot force your way on them. Does that make sense? So it's something to ponder over. How do we do it in our societies today? And then being mindful of the steps. So the story of the first time shirk happened, it's interesting because, Shaitan wanted us to worship other than Allah, wanted us to deviate. Any means necessary. Shaitan doesn't care how, he just wants us to deviate by any means, in whichever way that will make us go on a path other than the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he came to the people that, like the generations before Nuh alayhi salam, and there was a group of righteous people, said, وَلَا تَذَرُنَّ آلِهَتَكُمْ وَلَا تَذَرُنَّ وَدًّا وَلَا سُوَاعًا وَلَا يَغُوثَ وَيَعُوقَ وَنَسْرًا. Those 5 individuals, they were righteous, they were well known, they were respected. So when they died, generations after, the shaitan came in the form of a human being and said to the people, why don't you remember them? Like, why don't you create statues for them and keep them in the market, in the downtown area, so that you would remember them and never forget them. So every time you see these statues, they remind you of how righteous they were. And so they're like, oh, well, that's a great idea. Let's do it. And they did it. And then years, like generations after, he comes to the next generation, and he says to them, do you know that your ancestors used to worship these idols? Like, they used to have them here, and they used to bow down to them, and they used to ask them. So guess what they did? They did exactly that. Those are the tricks of shaitan. It's step by step. It's never like clear cut. It's never coming at you at one time. So one of the classes that I took in undergrad, it was a social work class about adolescent sexuality. It was a very interesting class, like one of the best. That was the only undergrad class that I really enjoyed. Okay, I was a business major, and this was like it fulfilled one of the requirements, so I took it in the social work department. But basically, we talked about like the development of sexuality in adolescents and children in media. And one of the things that our teacher did is that she invited a priest, and his name was Philip Hart, I think his name is Philip Hart. And I think he said to us that he was one of the first in his church, like he as a priest or as a pastor, to come out of the closet and say that he was gay. And when he was sharing his story, he started from the time that I didn't know that's where it was heading. He started with him being a very spiritual person as long as he could remember. From the time he was 6, he had a very close relationship with God. He had a very close relationship with his faith. He grew up studying Christianity, and he became a pastor. He was married at some point, but then he knew that something was off, because he was also not attracted to women, but he was attracted to men. And at some point he had to come out of the closet and say declare, be authentic to himself and declare that he was gay. And these are the days where learning the deen was new to me as well. And I remember, wallahi, sitting in that class and feeling as a human being, completely feeling where that man was coming from, and thinking he's a spiritual person. Why would he do something that goes against his faith? He believes in his faith, but then here he is fighting these emotions. And he decided, God does not want me to fight them, so I'm going to live with them. And I remember, what I did? I reached out to my purse, and I looked up the Quran, and I looked up the verses that I thought was speaking about Lut alayhi salam and his people, and I read them just to say what is Allah really saying. And alhamdulillah that I thought about the Quran and I understood the Arabic to just read it, but I also didn't have enough knowledge, right? The deen still was new to me, and learning the deen was still new to me. And I was taking this class with two of my two close friends, one of them my best friend. And she said something that for years and years and years, just communicated how somebody who doesn't if you have never been taught aqidah, if you've never been taught about the Quran, and you've never been taught about why Allah, how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decree, if you've never been taught that, it will make sense for you to go with, hey, you know what, I'm going to accept it. She said to me, why would somebody go against all the odds and do something so completely against what their society accepts, and what their society accepts, if it's going to bring them so much pain, unless they did it because it was just so natural for them, Allah created them that way. And my friend wasn't saying it, she said it from a place of I wonder, and eventually, alhamdulillah, we both learned that, the answer is Allah could have created you with those emotions, and the emotion is if it's there, it's there. But Allah still wants you to submit and overcome those emotions by not living them in action. That Allah is not going to hold you accountable for an emotion if you don't follow it up with with action, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will actually reward you for overcoming those emotions because you did it for his sake, right? So just like somebody who loves alcohol and loves to drink and is always known to drink, but then they say like, no, I'm not going to do that, right? So because for the sake of Allah. And people have different desires, and Allah created people differently, right? So my desire could be very different from your desire, and the strength of it could be very different. The problem is when we adopt a new way of thinking and we say, this is okay and God is okay with it, and God is going to accept me the way I am. And where is it coming from? The question is like, well, who said that? It's we collectively as a group said that, but do we have text from Allah? Do we have any communication from a prophet or a messenger where that is okay? No, we don't. We're just as a group saying that it is going to be okay, and we're going to change the textual evidences, and we're going to say that was for a different time. We have a different law now, right? So do you see how that falls like in our modern day? Those are the ideas, like it's the time where ideaism is competing with the Quran and the Sunnah, right? Whatever idea. So I just talked about the idea of being homosexual, and how like it's okay. I'm going to live it. And I know of somebody who was like taking Islamic classes with me, who eventually got married to a woman. And when I said like, how come this is being public? And she said, what is wrong with it? And I was thinking, I know you know what is wrong with it. But then it was like a door that I didn't even want to open, because I was thinking, where did this come from? And it doesn't happen overnight. It's actually steps that Shaitan takes us upon. And reasoning, and it's like we disconnect ourselves from the Quran and the Sunnah, and we find a way to make okay what is okay for us but not okay with the Quran and the Sunnah. And when we do that, guess what we're doing? We're doing kufr, because we're rejecting the words of Allah, we are denying the words of Allah, we are turning away from the words of Allah, and then it becomes totally like kufr. Right? So this is where you, if you go back to that, how do you define something to be major kufr versus minor kufr, or a major sin? This is a perfect example that if somebody is homosexual but they're feeling guilty and they're feeling sad about it and they're feeling disappointed about it, they are simply committing a major sin. If Allah wishes, can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear that? Jama, there we have a construction worker working in the house. I hope you guys can still hear me and not hear that. You could hear it. Okay, give me 1 second. I'm just going to ask them to maybe resume in like 10 minutes. Yeah, you guys, I have 10 minutes to finish. Can you please wait? You're done? Because I couldn't. You're done? Okay. Good. Yeah, I'm done in 10 minutes anyway. Thank you. MashaAllah. Anyways, it's nice when you have a Muslim person doing stuff for you. Alhamdulillah. Anyways, so what was I saying? So somebody could be doing all of this, but with a state of guilt, and that's just a minor sin. It's not a minor sin. It's a major sin, but it's a sin. Allah could forgive it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could punish it. It's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? But then when a person justifies it and a person says it's okay and Allah is okay with it and Allah will forgive me, then you're completely going against the Quran and the Sunnah, and it becomes kufr. It takes you out of the fold of Islam. So this is like recognizing the steps that shaitan takes with us, and like our emotions as well. Because like to me, wallahi, what was real is that I felt where this man was coming from. And that makes me wonder, like when we have a lot of our youth who are in the LGBTQAI community, who are supportive, who are what do you call like who are saying it's okay, they this is the way God created them. And it's like where I understand activism exists, but then when it's like it could easily cross into a different path, and for some people it did already, and for some people it just becomes like without us intending, we have left Islam, right? And this is when like we need to learn about, and it's not just with homosexuality, but any idea that you could think of. If we become so adamant that what we know is the truth and it's the ultimate truth, right? Even though what we know and what we believe in might have some truth to it, right? Might have some truth to it. If a person is struggling with homosexual feelings and emotions, that is true. Like you can't deny that it's happening, right? But then it's like, does that mean Allah is okay with it? Does that mean you could go ahead and act upon it? Does that mean you can go to the masjid and start a masjid and say, like, we are Muslims who do this and we are okay with it, Allah is okay with us? This is how religion has changed, okay? In the past, and now like we see it happening with also Muslims. So this is a dua. So you know how we said that our ultimate goal is to seek the love of Allah and to seek the pleasure of Allah. So this is a dua that I absolutely love. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like make it a dua we say all the time. A part of it is something I say all the time, but this narration was actually kind of new to me, where the Prophet ﷺ says that Dawood ﷺ used to always say, Allahumma inni as'aluka hubbuk, oh Allah, I ask you for your love and the love of those that love you and the actions that bring about your love. And Allahumma, oh Allah, this is the part that was new to me, oh Allah, make your love more beloved to me than my own self, than my own family, and more beloved to me than cold water. You know how good cold water is, you guys? Like, cold water is amazing. And our nafs is also amazing. Our family is more amazing, subhanallah, right? But then when like you see to the extent where this Prophet of Allah, Dawood alayhi salam, is saying, Ya Allah, like don't make my heart make a decision ever that is based on anything that will take me away from your love. Make my number one thing that I seek is your love and your pleasure with me. And if we are granted that, guess what? We are protected from so much harm in this dunya and in the akhirah. We are protected from so much, subhanAllah. So the questions you have for reflections is, what lessons do you draw from Surat AlKafiroon? And how do these lessons have a personal relevance to you? Why? Why do they have a personal relevance to you? What actions is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asking you from this surah? I'd love to hear from you, but in terms of the actual class, like any thoughts, questions, reflections you have, please go ahead and type them. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. أرأيت من اتخذ إلهه هواه فأضله الله على علم وختم على سمعه وقلبه. Oh my God. If I tell you about that ayah gave me nightmares for a few months, subhanallah. So basically, have you seen the one who has taken his own desires as God? So I want to drink right now. And it's the day of Ramadan, so I'm going to drink. My nafs tells me do this, I do it. My nafs tells me, cheat, I will cheat. My nafs tells me seek this, I will seek it. My nafs, whatever it tells me to do, I will do it. Not the opposite, where I'm submitting to Allah, and whatever Allah tells me to do, then I will do it. And so when we take our nafs and whatever desires our nafs has, sometimes it could put us in a place of serious trouble, because we're getting into things that are not permissible, that are not okay, that are not halal. So then guess what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does? Even if you had knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala takes away that knowledge from you, right? So this ayah talks about the importance of implementing the knowledge that you have. If you don't do it, Allah will take it away from you. Then you become like the person who didn't even have knowledge, because you completely gave into your nafs and every single desire it had, to the point where now your nafs rules you. You don't rule your nafs, right? I remember around the time that this ayah was taught to me, I'm going to send you guys that we're having a retreat in September. I sadly cannot go to it, but I'm going to send you guys a flyer and information about it. I read Quran to Dr. Haifa, and I read to her thinking, like, fix some of my tajweed. And she said to me, she read it to me. When I read, she said to me, you need to work on these things with a tajweed teacher. And I said to her, I don't really like doing tajweed. And I was speaking from a place of truth, right? I really don't like doing tajweed. And she said, everything we want, we don't do? Is it about what our hearts want, or is what Allah wants us to do? And I was looking at her like, really? Did you just have to say that to me right now? And it really, like that whole year up until now, it started a journey of me questioning, why am I doing this right now? What's my intention? Is it to please Allah, or is it to please my nafs? Another teacher of mine once said to me, like, if you're just like, you're feeling tired, and but you have a kid and you have to feed him, it's like, it's your responsibility. It doesn't matter how you feel. It's your responsibility. Fulfill it. And it's like this ayah was saying, like, if you don't do that, Khaltoon, Allah will take away your knowledge. Allah will take away that knowledge He has given you, because you're not. And it's not just that, like everything else. There are times of Allah asks us to obey Him as much as we can, right? What is that as much as you can? Everybody knows their own ability and their own capacity, right? Are we living that? Are we living to that? But the class is done, you guys. If anybody has to go, they could go. We'll just have these discussions here, inshallah. Okay, you can hear me and the hammering. All right, Jazakallah khair. Wa iyaki habibti, wa iyaki. See, this is how we end up going out of time, right? Today I planned for Kafiroon and Surat al-Takathur. But then when I was actually reviewing it and I uploading them, I only did Kafiroon, and I said to myself, we'll be done about 10:30. Well, it's 11 o'clock. But in my mind, I wanted to do both. MashaAllah. All right. I'm going to stop the recording.